Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. Today's webinar is all about esports in the age of COVID-19. My name is Patrick Buono. I'm a marketing manager with BI Advisory Services, and I'll be running the webinar for you guys today. So, as always, if you've been on one of our webinars before, you know we'd like to give everyone a few minutes to log on and get settled. So, as we're doing that, I always just have a few housekeeping items to go through with everybody quickly. I'd like to start off by reminding everybody that we are recording today's webinar, and that all registered attendees will be receiving an email from BIA Advisory Services with links to the on-demand version of the webinar, as well as a PDF of the slide deck. So be looking out for an email from BIA probably sometime tomorrow. If any time during today's webinar you experience any technical difficulties, please email us at webinars@bia.com. We have some staff that is standing by that can assist you with that. And then finally, we'd just like to encourage everyone to kind of stay engaged with today's webinar. We have a follow-up survey after the webinar logs off. And if you could, just at any time during today's webinar, you have a question, please just go ahead and type it in your questions box in your GoToWebinar panel. We'll try to get to your questions today, but if we run out of time and get too close to it, we'll go ahead and follow up with you separately afterwards. So please just let us know. So with that, I think we're going to go ahead and get things started here. I'm going to hand things off to one of the moderators for today's webinar. He is the Managing Director of BIA Advisory Services, Rick Ducey. Rick?
Patrick, thanks very much, and welcome everybody. Thank you for giving us some of your time today. So esports is a big topic. These days, there aren't many live sports going on, and we're hearing from the professional leagues about what they're going to do with baseball and football and so on. But a lot of sports enthusiasts have discovered esports, and so that's what we're going to hear about today. About a year ago, Mitch, you and I did another session on esports, which was very well received. So this is our second installment in this webinar series, looking specifically at esports. So Mitch, I'm really looking forward to the speakers we've lined up today. Get any opening thoughts?
Well, last time, Rick, when we did this, we had panel discussion, but more people have asked questions about what is esport, differentiating it from gaming, what does it mean? And it's grown in popularity. And we were speaking with Lori, one of our participants now, and she has a team, an esports team, Outlaws, and now all of a sudden they're on broadcast, which she will certainly talk about when she speaks. So today we're going to just do presentations and then let everyone pick up facts, share it, interpretations. But that will be the group today. Are you going to do an introduction in terms of content?
Yes, I got a couple more slides, Mitch, and then we'll kick it back to you.
Okay.
Okay, so for the next slide, just a couple overview comments here. Yeah, esports is an exciting new place to be. For those of you who are more familiar with esports, the structure of the industry and what the audience experience looks like and kind of the whole ecosystem, we will definitely have more information to share with you. For those of you who are less familiar with it, part of what we'll do today is kind of lay out the basics, you get a sense of it, and all the moving parts and pieces. But exactly, Mitch, when we did this a year ago, we were thinking, boy, esports as a phenomenon is attracting incredible audience demographics. So it's got audience growth and really attractive demographics that audiences want to reach at a time where particularly some of the traditional media platforms are getting a bit challenged in those regards. So we wanted to highlight esports as an adjacent market, essentially, that broadcasters could get into, aggregate audiences and make those audiences available to advertisers. And Beasley, Caroline Beasley, is one of the people that was sort of early into that. And now we'll be hearing from Lori to talk about what it's like to start with a media company and now running an esports franchise. So very interesting to hear about that. So it's game-based, but there are still actual physical events, physical venues. So there are athletes, there are games, there are contexts, there are local franchises, there's sponsorships, there's advertising, there's ticket sales. It's really the sports phenomenon, but just in a different dimension. Next slide, please. So the key things that are interesting, fast-growing audiences, hard-to-reach demos, incremental revenue streams. Those are the things that are really exciting to people in this business. And we at BIA focus on local marketing and advertising, and esports is definitely taking on a local character as we hear in this session. So Mitch, I'm going to turn it back to you. Why don't you tell us about our speakers and then get things going here.
All right, each of them will probably introduce themselves, but let me give you the flow of our discussion today. So Zach from Simul Media is going to take us through the esports ecosystem. kind of a framework to establish our webinar's baseline. Lori of Beasley will add life and personality to Zach's esports skeleton as a producer of esports content and owner of an esports team, Outlaws. MRI Simmons, Ben, he'll vivisect the esports fan, focusing on the valuable core 18 to 34 base. And we'll finish up the webinar with ComScore's explanation and exploration of gaming trends, esports and non-esports. Subject matter so big that ComScore thought it would be best to have two presenters, both Chris and Peter. So, Zach, now that everyone's seen everyone's picture, take it away with your presentation.
Great, thank you very much. Hello, everybody. So I'm Zach. I am a marketing manager at Simul Media, and I'm also a columnist for Media Post on gaming and esports. So to kick things off, right, Rick mentioned that, you know, for people who are familiar with the esports ecosystem and the way that it works, well, the reality is that a lot of people aren't, and it's a very confusing landscape. So Patrick, if you hit next a couple of times, you'll have arrows fill up this screen here. And what you're seeing is that, you know, Fortnite is both an esports game and not an esports game to most people. Ninja is constantly the guy in the middle. He's associated as the face of esports, but he's actually not an esports athlete. And Twitch is the esports platform, but it's also not an esports platform. And this is majorly confusing for a lot of people. So I'm setting out right now to sort of take you through the base ecosystem. If you go next, you'll see this is effectively the ecosystem that leads you to esports. And in order to understand esports, you have to understand video gaming, because video gaming and esports, they're different, right? If you go to next, please, we're going to start with publishers next. Thank you. So publishers, right? Publishers are the entities that finance development of video games. They're either developing them in-house or through third-party studio subsidiaries. They develop and implement the go-to-market strategy through partnerships and activations. And so they control the IP for the game that's created, and they reap the rewards and failures. Next. Some of the top publishers are Tencent, Sony, Nintendo, Microsoft, as you see here. They've got all sorts of notable releases. Tencent is located in China and sort of it's the largest video game publisher in the world right now. And notable release of theirs is League of Legends, which I'll talk more about later. Next, please. Games, next. So a bunch of generics about video games here. Globally, in 2019, video games did $152 billion in revenue. Mobile gaming was the largest portion of that, but overall PC and console, which effectively produced the same games, did more than mobile. There are about 22 billion gamers worldwide, and in the US alone, 68% of people 2+ play video games, and that includes mobile, PC, and console, although people should look at mobile gamers and PC and console gamers a little bit differently. It also did $35.4 billion in revenue in 2019. Now, an important thing to note is that a lot of the top video game titles are not all esports capable. So Minecraft, for example, while maybe it will develop more esports functionality eventually, it's really not an esports game. In terms of the genres and classifications of games that are big in the esports world and in the video game world, you've got first-person shooters like Call of Duty, classic shooter games. You've got the battle royale types like Fortnite, where people drop into an arena and it's the last man standing. Real-time strategy games where you're like a general overhead controlling your army, and multiplayer online battle arenas like League of Legends, which are harder to explain, so we're not going to get into it for today. Next, please. Monetization models of these games. Two of them you're probably very familiar with. One-time payments of $5.99.99, that's generally been the framework for most games on console, or subscription payments. So there are games like World of Warcraft where people are paying $15 a month. Everyone kind of knows that. But now there's been a surge in free-to-play games, and these free-to-play games like Fortnite, Apex Legends, etc., they're sort of taking over the scene. If you go next, please. Free-to-play microtransactions, right? So the games are free-to-play themselves, but the way that these companies make money is that they have all sorts of extra add-ons that people can buy that give them customizations that people are spending an absurd amount of money on. On average, annually, people are spending $120 as a gamer. 50% of gamers spent money on microtransactions in the third quarter of 2019, and $1 million a day is spent in Fortnite on these things. If you look at the revenue breakdown, free-to-play games are generating the vast bulk of video game revenue, whereas one-time game payments are only doing about 19 billion of that. Next, please. So to give you an example that I think is fun, a lot of these free-to-play monetization pieces for these microtransactions, they do a fun customizable appearance change. If you hit next, you'll see this is a character from League of Legends who's imposing. He's got this big medieval armor. He attacks people with his axe. And one fun thing that people affectionately referred to one of his abilities in the game as was called dunking. Okay, so they took that and that idea and they made you pay $20, and then boom, you could turn this medieval knight into a basketball player that would dunk on his opponents. It doesn't do anything for people in terms of winning. That doesn't make your character better. It just changes the look in game, and people spend an absurd amount of money on this stuff. Next. Here are the top 10 game franchises. Mario is a classic. Next, please. Gaming trends, right? So there's more free-to-play content, as I mentioned, and they're trying to figure out how to make that better from the mobile gaming world. The mobile gaming world is sort of bogged down with advertising, where you get interrupted in your experience. Even though the game is free-to-play, you're not actually able to play the game as much as you want because you're watching all these ads. There's also genre and universe expansion. A lot of games are jumping around. League of Legends was so popular as a battle arena game that they're now making it into a trade card game. They're now making it into a Mortal Kombat style fighting arcade game and more. And there's also a growing popularity of people watching people play games. It's called streaming. Next, please. So let's talk about game streaming. Next. If you hit next a couple of times, we're going to fill up this timeline with 4 different timelines. So first, you've got Twitch, which started in 2007. Amazon bought them in 2014 after YouTube failed to buy them because of antitrust issues, given that Google sort of owned everything. And these Let's Play videos ended up influencing the way that Twitch launched in the style of which people watch streamers. Next, please. Facebook is now in here. They had Facebook games like Farmville and whatnot, and only recently in 2018 did they launch Facebook Gaming, which is slowly but surely picking up some traction, although I've had trouble seeing the unique value of Facebook's streaming platform versus others. And lastly, next please, you've got Microsoft entering the mix with Mixer, and they're only really notable because they signed Ninja over exclusively from Twitch to their platform in 2019. Next, please. The monetization models of these different companies, right? These streaming services, they all have proprietary currency of some sort, except for YouTube, where you pay a certain amount. Some of the revenue goes to the platform, and some of the revenue then of this proprietary currency you can give to your favorite streamers. They also allow you to subscribe for X amount of dollars every month to a certain channel, and they all support video advertising. Next. What are some trends in game streaming? There's content diversification, right? So on Twitch, it's not just video games anymore. Now you've got people popping bubble wrap for something called ASMR streams, where it's like the sound is supposed to calm you and whatnot. There's also different types of gameplay. There's a lot of talent poaching, right? So as I mentioned about Ninja moving over from Twitch to Mixer, he's been exclusively signed, where those exclusivity contracts hadn't been coming around. Content is also subject to these exclusivity contracts. The Overwatch League, which Lori's team, the Houston Outlaws, is a part of, exclusively streams now on YouTube. And there's also Premier League ubiquity, right? So the biggest events on Twitch and whatnot are these esports events, these Premier Leagues like League of Legends and whatnot. Next, please. All right, streamers, next. So the people who perform or broadcast themselves, a streamer is a content creator broadcasting live on a platform to an audience. Next, please. Now, a lot of people think that people who play video games seem the same. It's like, oh, well, if Ninja's playing a video game on Twitch, then, you know, Ninja is also an esports athlete, et cetera. Well, actually, there's a big difference in the people who play video games, whether they're associated with a team brand or an individual brand. Hit next a couple of times for me. Fill that up. Great, thank you. So there are plenty of similarities between them. They both play video games. They're both streaming as individuals. It's not like there's 8 people on their stream at once. It's them just broadcasting themselves. They have a social following and they acquire sponsorships. But on the team brand side, esports athletes are salaried. They're insured by teams. They rely on their team standing, and they operate in professional circuits. Okay. Individual brand streamers, who are full-time recreational streamers, as I like to call them, they rely on their social following for income, and generally they're self-employed. Esports athletes are top of their game. They're really good players. Individual recreational streamers, they can be terrible at the game, but if they're entertaining for their audience, then people are going to watch them. And they earn most of their revenue from subscriptions and donations from their fans. Next, please. So let's take the classic example here. Ninja, he's 28 years old. He started playing Halo professionally in 2009, and then he became a Twitch streamer in 2011, at which point he stopped competing in an esports capacity for the most part. He has 14, or before he left Twitch, he had 14 million followers there, and he has 22 million and counting YouTube subscribers. He earned around $500,000 per month from these subscriptions, and when he signed to move to Mixer, he got $30 million, which is nuts. His sponsorship deals, he got some with Mixer, Adidas. I actually own a collaboration shoe. I'm a bit of a sneaker fanatic on the side, and he did a collaboration shoe with Adidas that I own, which is great fun. But if you hit next, please, he's not an esports athlete, okay? At the end of the day, he's an individual recreational streamer, and while he might be skilled at his game, his following and whatnot doesn't come from him being a professional competitor. It comes from him playing online and broadcasting his wins to people. Next, please. How do these people make money? Well, proprietary currency allows them to get some of that money as well. And then not only do they have the subscription and donation revenue, but they also get a part of the advertising revenue through CPM type metrics. Next, please. All right, non-esports. That's basically everything we just covered. We were really focusing on, okay, people play video games, they broadcast themselves playing video games, and you've got streamers who are playing this content. Esports, that's why we're here. Let's jump into this. How do you spell esports? Well, all three of the ways listed here are wrong. Next, please. You really want to treat it the same way you treat the word email, okay? If it's at the beginning of a sentence, if it's a proper noun, then you're going to capitalize it. If not, you're going to leave it. The key components of esports is organized video game competition. There are multiple players and teams. There are prizes. There's usually a live audience. You know, even though people are talking about how COVID-19 is great for esports because, hey, it's all online anyway, they do actually enjoy having physical audiences, okay? It's structured. There are rules, there are qualifications, there are operators. I'm sure Lori knows a lot from the team level about the ways that their teams qualify and the operators that they work with for putting on these leagues. Next, please. Let's get a brief timeline. Hit next one more time, I think. So basically, you've got a period in the early 1970s where we have our first earliest recorded esports competition, where Stanford University hosted the classic arcade game Space Invaders, and it was a competition for who could get the highest score, and winner got to walk away with a free year's worth of the Rolling Stone subscription. Then between 1998 and 2009, you had some broadcast presence of gaming and esports competitions. And now you're seeing that come back a little bit actually in the coronavirus era. But also college varsity status has been granted. Collegiate programs are starting up. There are all sorts of talent bidding wars. And actually, esports is under consideration for the Olympics. Next, please. Esports revenue. These numbers change all the time. It's really hard to figure out what the most reliable numbers are when it comes to the amount of money, because you're not sure, are people counting gaming revenue in some of these, are people counting esports? This is the best that we've got right now, which basically breaks down sponsorship, media, advertising, consumer ticket sales, and game publisher fees associated with putting on these esports. And it's about $1.1 billion right now. Teams, next please. Team generics, okay. Lori will know a good amount about this as well. I keep shouting out Lori, love Lori. Anyway, talented individuals grouped together with a common goal. There are 3 to 5 players generally on a team per a game, okay? So this really important thing for you to understand that generally can be quite confusing is that most esports teams are under an umbrella brand that stretches across a number of specific video game titles, okay? But that being said, if I play Fortnite for my team, it's very unlikely that I also play League of Legends for my team as well. There's going to be people who specialize in a game-specific title, and they're under the same team umbrella. The Houston Outlaws, which is Lori's team in the Overwatch League, is actually an exception to this. The Outlaws only compete in Overwatch. And that's because Activision Blizzard, the publisher of Overwatch, set up the infrastructure of their game to be a team-based localized franchise, and therefore didn't want teams that would compete in a bunch of different games. That being said, the ownership of these teams does stretch across different titles. It's really just that the specific Houston Outlaw team is only present in Overwatch. There are a lot of teams. There are 100+ teams globally, but now, as I mentioned, due to this localized model, there are 25 or so US-specific teams. The competitions, they range from 28 to 90 games in a regular season. Games usually go for 1 to 2 hours. And there's, as I'm mentioning, a growth of localized leagues and franchises. Ownership. There are all sorts of traditional sports teams involved, like the Kraft Group and the owners of the Patriots. They're involved in esports teams. Celebrities like Drake, he's involved in esports teams. Investment firms, esports talent. So big esports players like Nadeshot, for example, they own their own teams now. And venues. You've got all sorts of different venues popping up that are owning teams that play within their walls. Next, please. Leagues, next, please. So the league generics, right? This is the organization of professional competition for game-specific leagues. And the formalization of esports really came through this league creation. Publishers will either create a league or license their game to a third-party operated league. So in the example of Activision Blizzard and Overwatch, they created the league and then teams filled it that bought in. There are 50 active leagues worldwide, and they're primarily of Western origin. So even though players in the East are generally the best players, they actually compete often in the West. And these leagues are comprised of teams, and these teams compete with one another. They're both amateur and professional. They're not just professional leagues. There are some younger leagues as well. And the competition is generally for prizes. There's all sorts of brackets, very similar to the way that traditional sports work in that sense. Next, please. What's winning look like? It's different per game. Destroying the central structure, planting and defusing bombs, capturing points, scoring goals, eliminating enemy players, you name it. Next, please. Average game attendance, right? So even though it's not, the two inputs are a little bit different, given that we're talking about specific events highlighted in blue, you can see that physical attendance is actually quite high for these types of events, like in traditional sports. Next, please. What's unique about the viewing? Well, you get a POV from players rather than above. You get an interactive chat, which is big because for most sports viewing, you're on Twitter or you're on Facebook or you're on Instagram and you're talking about things. With esports viewing and all the streaming platforms that they use, people can comment live and interact with the other audience members live in the interactive chat on the side. And you, of course, have the ability to contribute to the event by donating to your favorite streamers, by subscribing to channels, and so on. Next, please. Trends. As I mentioned, classification as a sport. It's going to potentially be included in the Olympics. Publishers are taking more direct control. So, excuse me, no one owns the sport of baseball. But if someone were able to own the sport of baseball, it might really change things. And so in this case, you have that happening with leagues when they're owned by the publishers. Esports specific venues are coming up. There's one in LA. There are some in California, others in California. School and grassroots organizations are promoting early interest by offering after-school programs and whatnot. There are diversifications of platforms. Stream platforms are hosting specific leagues and venues, right? Amateur participation, measurement investments from people like MRI Simmons and Comscore, and of course, advertising and sponsorship, exploitation and explosion. Next, please.
Zach, you have 2 minutes.
Closing out. Yes,
Yep,
we're closing out.
Okay.
So advertising, let's jump through some of these. MasterCard did a deal with League of Legends. Now you can get they're developing League of Legends decals for people's MasterCard cards. Next, please. Coca-Cola, the Houston Outlaws team owned by Lori and folks, they can actually get their logo printed on a Coca-Cola bottle from the website. Next, please. Ninja, he ended up doing a collaboration with Red Bull as he wears on his bandana where people got a chance to play with him. Next, please. Teams can get sponsored housing where they all live together and train. Rocket Mortgage and Quicken Loans sponsored the 100 Thieves Team House. Next, please. Product placement. Now, this one really blows people's minds. So the NFL did one with Fortnite where people could buy jerseys associated with their favorite teams for their characters to wear in game. And then quite recently, Louis Vuitton and League of Legends did a deal where now you can get a digital asset in game of a Louis Vuitton decal on the character pictured here. And they also created the trophy case for the big League of Legends tournament trophy for Worlds 2019, which was the big championship. Next, please. So to sum up in closing, all esports are video games, but not all video games are esports. And that's really important for you to take away so that when you get into conversations with people about, hey, you know, what am I thinking of when I'm thinking of esports? What am I thinking of when I'm thinking of video games? You have to remember that some things that apply to gaming don't apply to esports, and some things that apply to esports don't apply to gaming. Thank you. That's it from me.
Zach, thank you. Take a deep breath. And Lori, you're up.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right. So as I was introduced, I'm Lori Burgess, the Chief Operating Officer for Beasley's Esports division, which covers our Checkpoint brands and the Houston Outlaws. And I'm going to tell you guys all about it today. So next. So just to give you a little background in case you're not familiar with our company, we are a radio company. We are a legacy company that is largely rooted in the radio space and exists as the 4th largest radio company in the country. But in 2018, we decided to diversify our offerings and our businesses and to start thinking about the idea of producing higher quality cross-platform content for that next generation of consumer. We weren't sure if it was going to be in video games or esports or where, but we really believed that as a company that was largely rooted in producing media content for baby boomers and Gen X, that we needed to start thinking about, you know, what did the future hold for us? So we're going to talk today a little bit about some of our brands that span from the Checkpoint XP brand, which is a brand that covers the news and opinions that are fueling the gaming industry, from the hardcore esports enthusiasts and players right down to the novice, to Checkpoint XP on campus, and now the Houston Outlaws that we've been talking a bit about today. I think it's really exciting for us to talk to you because we've got our finger on the pulse of literally every facet of the business. But here's the concept. You know, we are covering the ecosystem. We want to be able to walk the walk and also talk the talk. So we got into this space with the purchase of Checkpoint in September of 2018. We made an investment in the Renegades franchise, which is based in Michigan, and it has, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but it has multiple games and leagues that it plays in, which is exactly what we were just talking about and listening to during Zach's presentation. We launched our very first brand extension for the Checkpoint brand last September with Checkpoint XP on Campus, which serves as the voice of collegiate esports, produced by students for students in collaboration with the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. We strengthened our commitment in the esports space with the purchase of the Houston Outlaws last November, which we will talk about today. And then we've also taken it one step forward. You guys are talking about local, you're thinking about it. Well, guess what? We are too, because this phenomenon is not just happening at the top of the pyramid. It's manifesting itself right down to the local levels. We as a radio company have DJs that are gamers like you cannot believe. They understand and are passionate about their games. And we also have audience data from, I'm blowing it here, Scarborough, that really tells us that a large number of our radio listeners are gamers as well. So we wanted to make sure that we are producing media content that very much caters to the growing and ever-changing interests of our audiences. Next. So just some stats that are kind of fun, you know, for us that really reinforce that this is the place that we needed to be. There is no stopping esports. When you look at the staggering statistics, it is speculated, and God knows this is pre-COVID, so I don't know actually how these numbers are going to actually shift and potentially elevate esports, but you can see that the concept of esports leagues, admittedly, there's multiple leagues under the esports umbrella. It's starting to rival the numbers of the NFL, and it's speculated that by 2021, it will exceed the popularity and audiences of the NHL, the NBA, almost combined, if you will. Next. In addition to that, I think this is really a driving point that really motivated us to be in this space. We are really cognizant of the fact that, while traditional sports is something that all of us know and have grown up with, the reality of it is that younger consumers are not nearly as engaged with these types of professional sports the way previous generations and demos have been. And so, as you can see here, that traditional sports are just not grabbing that younger, under age 35 consumer the way esports is. In fact, 80% of esports viewers are under the age of 35, which is very, very telling about what the interest levels are of Gen Y and Gen Z. Next. And then I don't want to spend too much time on it because I think Zach did a great job. So many different marketers that are leaning forward, that are looking for tomorrow how they're going to really capture and engage with younger consumers, become critical brands, become brands that people have an enormous amount of purchase intent and brand loyalty around. And there's just so many different brands. I mean, every day this is growing for sure. I mean, I wish I had changed this slide actually, because we just broke the Samsung business for the Houston Outlaws. So every day it seems like a new brand is recognizing that the future lies in targeting that younger consumer through mediums like esports. Next. So I would say to you that, from our vantage point, we believe that esports is at a tipping point, and whether we're having this conversation in the midst of COVID or whether we had it 2 months ago before everything went haywire, I will tell you that, Saturday Night Live did the most incredible skit on this back in the fall, and if you haven't seen it, look it up on YouTube. It's just absolutely hilarious. And I bring that up not to do a commercial for NBC and Saturday Night Live, but more to demonstrate to you that that is a brand that consistently has had their finger on the pulse of the cultural zeitgeist and where it's going. And when they talked about esports and the way in which they approach it, it was quite accurate. Many of you will identify with it. And if you don't, certainly many brands out there will, because everybody is continuing to scratch their heads and trying to figure out what this is all about if they are not immersed in this space already. I think social distancing with what we've experienced with COVID is just going to accelerate what is happening, particularly with the influence of, traditional sports and how they are being completely impacted this year and possibly next year with their fan bases. So it's going to really, I believe, propel esports much faster into the limelight. Next. So that's kind of the top point. I'm not going to do a complete and utter brand dive, so I don't want you to be overwhelmed, but just to kind of top line it, if you're sitting here going, I've never heard of Checkpoint XP, what is that? Again, it was the brand that we acquired, the very first that, will forever, I think, be dear to Caroline Beasley, because it's what really got us into this space, and it's a brand that is just growing like mad. Right now, it presently exists as a syndicated radio show. It's multi-platform. All of its content is being produced as audio and video content that gets edited and then released on YouTube, Twitch, Checkpoint XP, radio.com. And again, it really is designed to serve as the voice, the authority on esports and video gaming, covering all the news, the opinions that capture this wide audience, really, with lots of different interests and motivations in the sport, the players, the gamers, the game developers, everything. Next. We have a multitude of different programming. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it today, other than please come visit our website. But what I can tell you is that whether your interest is hardcore, what's going on college campuses, and yes, Zach alluded to it, it's nuts. You want a college scholarship, you want your kid to be a great, athlete on a college campus these days. You want your kid to play in a fantastic arena. You want them to have a career when they're done with school that they're incredibly passionate about in a sport entertainment category that is, top of mind. Man, this is the place to be. Whether conversely, you've got the Owl's Nest, which is a program that Robbie Landis on the Checkpoint team does, actually with a Blizzard caster, Jake Lyon, and they beat up what's going on in the Overwatch League with the teams, the 20 teams that live and play around the world every single week. So we've just got a multitude of different programming opportunities for different individuals to really appeal to what they're interested in, whether it's just gaming, whether it's Marvel Comics, everything that's kind of in that space. So it's really designed to target lots of different consumers. Next. But those lots of different consumers kind of fall into different groups. So if you're a hardcore gamer, you're going to be interested in certain content. In fact, I don't think we've talked much about it yet today, but this esports term is tough because us being a company that got, is rather new into this space, I will tell you that when we're talking about Overwatch, the player that's interested in Overwatch is not potentially interested in Fortnite, or they're not interested in NBA 2K. And so the bottom line is there's lots of different consumers that are coming into this space, from the hardcore competitor to the occasional social player to a lapsed gamer. Perhaps it's a guy who's 35, 40 years old that really used to be in gaming when he was in college, and then now that he's got kids and he works a huge job and he's got all this pressure, he can't do it. But oh my God, his 8-year-olds are now getting into something that he was once interested in. And so it's really a game, if you will, a sport that is uniting multiple generations in a household, which is really, really cool. Next.
And Lori, 2 minutes.
Oh, great. Wonderful. So let's just speed ahead. We've got Checkpoint on campus. Next. We talked a little bit about that. We've got the Renegades. You can see that we've got great brands there. Next. But we've got the Outlaws, and I know that that's the sexiest part of this presentation. It's a new brand that we purchased. Next. It appeals to, to young people across the country. We've got 20 teams that we're competing against throughout the country, and it makes for pretty sexy gameplay. Next. I don't want to spend time on this because we've kind of talked about the difference between a sport and an actual game. Move forward. Our team is larger than many. It's right now a roster of 11 players. Next. They're from around the world. It appeals to a much younger consumer. Look at the real difference here, guys. When you're looking at professional sports compared to this, it's a 24-year-old that we delivered. Next. I've already kind of talked a little bit about this, but this is very indicative of our league. The consumers that are coming and watching Overwatch teams like the Outlaws are not interested in some of these other professional sports. Next. We have huge numbers that we deliver as a team, and also players. That's what Zach was talking about. The followings of some of these top-notch players is unparalleled. Next. Next. Okay. Lots of different kinds of content opportunities. And there you have it. I mean, we are creating content, commercials. Next slide, please. TV programming, events, branding, products, lots of different things, bringing this sport to life across the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. See, and time to spare. So, Ben, talk to us about the right esports fan and user and viewer and all that good stuff that you have written about.
Thank you, Mitch. And thank you, Lori and Zach, too. You've teed me up perfectly, and in fact, I think we'll be able to skip a couple of my slides because you guys hit the nail on the head. If we could jump into the next slide, please. So my name is Ben. I'm from MRI Simmons. Next slide, please. If you are not familiar with MRI Simmons, I want to quickly give you a high level. The last half century, we've been in field tracking American consumers, including their behaviors, the brands they buy, the media they watch, and then a battery of psychographic and attitudinal statements. We really get to the heart of understanding the why behind people's actions. Next slide, please. In addition to our national core study, we also have deep dive studies that focus in different verticals, and one of them is our sports and esports fan study. Go to the next slide. This is fused to our core national study, and it goes really deep and adds a litany of behaviors that relate to what it means to be a sports fan. So how do you express your fandom? We can also profile fans based on, if they're light or average fans of different sports and esports as well. And we track different statements around sponsorship, media, merch, sports betting, etc. Next slide. Now, I think I ganked this one directly off of Zach, so let's just go to the next one. But the crucial thing that we've heard, twice now is that, gaming, esports is not just people playing video games together. It's not just people online streaming themselves as gaming personalities, and it's not Animal Crossing. Animal Crossing is getting a lot of attention right now as people are locked inside, and it's a great, fantastic game, and it's a social way to connect with friends maybe, but it's not esports. So next slide. Esports is, we lost the picture here, but that's okay. Esports is streaming fans. It's highly produced events. It's also, moments like this in the bottom here of devastating loss. This is a lot of energy and training that has gone into these teams, and Lori is certainly experiencing that firsthand with her players. If we go to the next slide, there's also these moments of pure joy of winning. So this is a team that won at the ESL Intel Finals in 2018, I believe, and the game was Call of Duty. This passion that you see in these players, and I wish we could turn the camera around and see all the screaming audiences, all the screaming fans in the audience. That is what is driving the business of esports, and why advertisers are increasingly coming in, and the revenue of esports is growing. Next slide, please. So as Lori and Zach alluded, defining esports is a bit of a challenge, because you have to separate esports from gaming as well. So this is the way that we define it in our study. It's also very similar to the way that Zach described it earlier. Again, it's multiplayer video games being played competitively, and these are events that are organized for viewers, whether it's in stadium or on TV or online. Next slide. So let's hop into the data. This is, it's worth noting that this is information from pre-COVID times, and we are in field now, continuing to track this study. So, I think we're all curious to see, how fandom of esports continues to evolve, in particular because of COVID. But, before then, we tracked that 16% of U.S. adults identify as being an esports fan, which is 39 million people. If we go to the next slide. We've heard it a couple times already, but this is really being driven by young fans. And so if you look at the slice of the pie among US 18 to 34, the proportion of people that are esports fans doubles, and about 1 in 3 identify as being an esports fan. And next slide, please. We've seen this one already as well, but again, look at this. It's amazing. This is such a relatively new sport. Particularly in the U.S., and we saw that it did begin, in Asia first and kind of migrated over here, but already it's capturing a level of fandom similar to, professional and college basketball. Next slide. So we looked a little bit about, different people that are involved in the gaming space. You have the influencers, the recreational influencers versus the competitive influencers. Well, let's look at all the different types of esports there are. This is a landscape. All these different logos you hear, hopefully you're familiar with some of them, like Fortnite, and we talk about League of Legends, etc. But the rest of these are all different games that have esports as well. So that means there's organized professional competitions around them. But as Lori kind of emphasized, there are 2 genres of esport where the most investment is being made by advertisers, and we're experiencing the biggest audiences and the most growth, and those are shooter and MOBA games. If we go to the next slide. There you have it, shooter and MOBA games. So for the rest of the slides I'm going to go through, I'm going to focus on profiling fans of those 2 genres specifically. So MOBA and shooters represent 65% of all esports fans, and among 18 to 34-year-old esports fans, it's as high as 80%. So this is really, especially among that younger, self-identified esports fan, these are the genres they're paying attention to. Next slide. So let's learn about them. I probably should have said a little something about the data here. So this is a 10,000 person survey we do, and it's fused back to our core study, just so that's clear. So if we go to the next slide, this is going to start to build on itself, and we'll start to get more color on who these people are. So we said 4 to 5 of them are male. 2/3 are white, but they do over-index on being more multicultural. So, an index of 126 that says that they are 26% more likely to be Asian than their other 18 to 34-year-old cohorts. And the median age here among 18 to 34 is 25 years old. Next slide. They have a median household income that is about 15% higher than the U.S. median. 60% of them are employed full-time. And again, I'm sorry to say, but this was pre-COVID, so we'll see how that changes. But another 10% are currently full-time students, and they are more likely to still be students now. But if you think about where they'll be in 5 years, their spending power will continue to increase, and we'll touch on that again in a second. Next slide. So I mentioned that we have this long battery of attitudinal statements, and so I'll be kind of rattling off some things we see there. So this MOBA to shooter esports fan, 18 to 34, they are influenced. They're more likely to buy the same products that celebrities use, more likely to buy products from companies that sponsor sports teams and athletes. They're also influential. People come to them for advice before buying new things, particularly electronic equipment. So they're not, there's a stereotype that this consumer is perhaps out of touch or self-isolated, but that couldn't be further from the truth. They're very social and very aware of pop culture. Next slide. They are worldly and fashionable, so they over-index on statements like being interested in foreign events. They feel that designer label clothing improves a person's image. They have budget to buy more expensive designer clothes. Those are the types of statements that pop for them. They're also discerning shoppers. They're not, a third of them say, I do not buy unknown brands merely to save money. Next slide. Let's continue to build this here. So they're also intellectually curious. They pop for wanting to pursue a life of challenge and novelty and change and trying new things that no one else has, and they say they're good at fixing things. They're ambitious. They want to get to the top of their careers. They're willing to sacrifice time with their family in order to get ahead. And again, these statements are all things where they over-index against other US 18 to 34. And of course, they're techie. They like to have, a lot of gadgets. They want to be the first on their friends. They have the latest electronic equipment, and they'll pay just about anything they can to get the electronics they really want. Couple other shout outs here. They're optimistic. They're risk takers. They are active physically. They're politically engaged, and they like the movies. Next slide.
Ben, 2 minutes.
2 minutes. All right. Well, let's just keep rattling through here. We'll build it up. MOBA and real-time strategy fans. Zach mentioned this. They're if you can just keep clicking through the slides here. They do skew a little bit more male, a little bit more Asian, have higher degrees, and a third of them are married. So I think the call out here is that they're a little bit settling into life a little bit further. So the MOBA and real-time strategy fan is certainly something you should treat a little bit differently from other esports and shooters, something to think about. The next slide. I also want to give a shout out to female gamers and esports fans, although it's a fifth of our target that we're dissecting here. This is a growing population of influence, and they're very similar to their male cohorts and their influential, ambition, techie type statements. They're also proudly unconventional. They pop for statements like, I like to make a unique fashion statement. I want to stand out in a crowd, and they under-index on having a conservative dress style. They are into fashion and shopping, and they also seem to identify with some eco-consciousness bent. Next slide, please. We're really rattling through these, so bear with me. I just want to give a kind of quick.
30 seconds.
I didn't catch that. 30 seconds. All right, we'll wrap up here then. We do pop here on the coast for our fans, and these areas here are indexed, so they do seem to over-index among each of the 34 for the South as well. And the last one I want to end on, if we go to the final slide, they do welcome sponsorship. 73% are more likely to buy products that sponsor in esports. 80% feel that brand sponsors elevate esports, and that sponsors are a sign of esports success. They feel they're going to be an esports fan forever. 75% of them do, and 75% of them also want to pass their love for esports on to the next generation. And of course, they're socially connected. They're connected online, and they're fans of esports because it's a way for them to connect with friends. So as I lose my voice, we'll end there.
We appreciate it, Ben, and your voice was loud and clear. And now we want to go to gaming and esports. So Ben, thank you. And we have two presenters from ComScore. There they are. You might confuse them because they both have beards while you're listening to them. Good luck, guys.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be with you all today and share some of ComScore's insights and current trends across gaming and esports landscapes. I'm Paul, and I'm joined with Chris. Together, we lead a number of ComScore's gaming and esports initiatives and hope to provide everyone with some food for thought around emerging opportunities across gaming and esports for publishers, platforms, leagues, and advertisers. Next, please. I'm going to hand it off to Chris to share some insights, and I'll wrap it up at the end.
Great, thanks. So ComScore, for those who aren't aware, we measure the gaming ecosystem and really all media ecosystems, but across PC, mobile devices, game consoles, linear television, and via our state of gaming survey. So we're going to touch on a lot of insights across all those different sources. To start here, though, obviously we're living during very unprecedented times, and there's some trends that that are really interesting that we'll get into, but that focus on gaming as a bright spot. But gaming has been growing in interest and engagement for quite some time now. There's over 200 million people every month engaging with gaming content and games across their phones and tablets and PC devices each and every month. Consoles penetration is 35% of U.S. Wi-Fi homes. That's over 30 million U.S. homes are actively engaging on their consoles each and every month. And not only from an audience perspective, but in engagement's growing as well. Over the past few years, time spent with gaming content is growing significantly. In an emerging area that obviously we're all paying attention to and will continue to grow is growth in time spent watching video game content through our various devices. On desktop, growth is over 80%. So really a multi-platform category, and it's going to be important that we look and understand these audiences in a cross-platform way.
And as we move forward, the gaming industry is finding new ways to reach audiences. We're seeing the category growing beyond traditional gaming with new, interesting, and related content like music, such as with the recent Travis Scott concert on Fortnite, as well as with the Twitch Stream 8 event.
Yeah, it's going to continue to drive that viewership number bigger and bigger as we go forward. From our survey, we want to understand the degree to which gamers are engaging across multiple platforms. Whether you're looking at a PC gamer or a console gamer, they are multi-platform. Over half of these gamers are playing games across all devices, PCs, consoles, and their mobile devices. And what's important about that audience, that multi-platform gamer audience, is they're open to a variety of game genres. So over a third of these folks are playing multiple game genres across these devices.
Accessibility across platforms is proving to be an important way of reaching gamers. Games supporting cross-platform play like Call of Duty, Hearthstone, Terraria, and Minecraft have all shown some of the largest audience and engagement growth in recent weeks since lockdown measures have occurred.
Yeah, that's a good segue. So we recently put a blog post out about some recent trends. This is some of the high-level stuff. There's some title-level stuff in there as well. But when we look at the audience engagement for the 6-week period, March 9th to April 19th versus that 6-week period prior, we're seeing double-digit growth in both the aggregate daily visitors and players of games, as well as their duration on PC and console platforms. And then you look at mobile, I think what's interesting here is it's not growing, but we're also not moving around the way we used to. Mobile is definitely something we take with us. We play games while on the go, and we're not on the go. Yet we aren't seeing a drop-off. So what's happening in this immediate time is the share of our time and the number of people engaging and turning to gaming content is the size of that pie is growing. It's filling a gap in our entertainment needs, in our social interaction needs, which is really I think amazing for the ecosystem to take note of. And there's more to come and more to learn as we continue to navigate through things.
And just to call out that while there have been a few significant game launches that happen to coincide with the time frame, like Call of Duty Warzone and the Valorant beta, gaming engagement as a whole has certainly grown significantly during this time frame.
Yep, absolutely. So we can go to the next one here. Esports, we're here to talk about that. We've covered, it's been great context as part of our survey. We asked gamers the degree to which they've been watching esports in the past 3 months. A quarter of the gamer population is recently engaged in esports, and just tying it back to that multi-platform gamer, it's that harder core gamer, that gamer that's engaging across multi-platforms that's much more likely to be tuning in and watching and consuming esports events. You can go to the next slide. All right, building off what we were just talking with Ben, genre-wise, first-person shooter, battle royale, MOBA, those categories are the ones that are driving the highest audiences amongst gamers for esports events. It's not surprising these titles tend to lend themselves as spectator sports, and we'll talk a little bit more about the composition of them from a gamer to a non-gamer in each of these categories. Sports genres, not as high as an audience there today, but I think it's going to be interesting to see how awareness and interest is going to change with all the recent virtual sports events that we've seen over the past few months. All that being said, playing a game or a genre of game isn't necessarily going to dictate your interest in esports. If you want to go to the next slide. Also in our survey, we wanted to get a sense of the degree to which those who play a game genre versus those who don't, their interest in watching esports within that genre. And it's no surprise the majority of folks who play a specific genre are interested and do watch esports within that genre. But 45% of non-Battle Royale gamers, have watched Battle Royale esports, things like Apex Legends tournaments, and 38% of non-FPS gamers have watched FPS esports like Counter-Strike. So clearly esports have this ability to attract, I think, a wider audience. Go to the next slide.
And in addition to esports events, the impact of the pandemic has resulted in gaming content filling a void left by the absence of traditional sports. Esports leagues have also had to shift programming due to COVID-19. Some events were canceled or postponed, while others shifted to online versus playing locally within arenas. But there have been some creative competitive gaming events like the NBA 2K Pro Basketball Tournament and the Mario Tennis Celebrity Tournament popping up as traditional sports became unavailable. These are just a couple of many examples of this occurring in the market, and likely many more to come. Next, please.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about Overwatch and some of the broadcasts on some of those timelines. I think as we look to late 2018, 2019, we start to get a good sense of what the TV audience potential is for esports. We measured this through our TV data. 87,000 average audience amongst the 2018 Overwatch League telecasts, and the finals reaching 420,000 homes. This is important. These are real valuable audiences to advertisers within a traditional television medium. And to kind of put that in context, the Overwatch finals audience was larger than all the recent international soccer broadcasts in the U.S. Over the past few months prior to things shutting down, with the exception of the English Premier League. So certainly an opportunity, a mainstream media and esports is able to reach pretty significant audiences.
Is that it?
Esports continues to.
We have 1 minute. 1 minute.
Okay, yeah, you bet. Why don't we jump to the last slide here? Yeah, because I want to finish up just with putting in context some of the things that are occurring in the moment. So, well, this is not esports, but the NBA 2K Players Tournament was one of those virtual sports events that recently was aired, and we just wanted to show what the opportunity is and how these events are going to help prove how esports events can reach these mainstream sports audiences. So we looked at the viewership of this tournament against heavy March Madness 2019 viewers and heavy NBA viewers. And the indexes are off the charts, as well as reaching that key 18 to 24 demo as well. So these events are giving us data and insight into what audience and viewership potential is for gaming content and esports delivered really across every medium. And obviously we're focusing on TV. Digital is going to be much, much bigger in the audiences that it can reach. But it's going to be, I think, interesting to see how the moment we're living in now and the things that are happening are going to give us the information around the opportunities that advertisers or publishers, the leagues, the platforms, I think should take note of now and start to determine what their plans are and how they're going to take advantage of really everything that esports and gaming is going to have to offer to them as we move forward. So that's really all we had there. The last slide, a little bit about things that are upcoming for us. Paul, do you want to just quickly hit that? We can wrap. Cool. We have our partnership with Twitch, continuing to bring more digital esports and live streaming audience to the market. As well, we just released our State of Gaming Wave 2. That full report's coming out soon, and so those are both areas that if folks have questions and want to delve deeper, we're certainly here to help and support and answer what we can.
Thank you, Chris and Peter. Back to you, Rick.
Thanks very much, everybody. Chris and Paul, you did a great job. Appreciate it. Lori, Ben, and Zach. I mean, we had a lot of landscape we covered here. So, I mean, some of the key takeaways I'm hearing, it's a legitimate platform. Some people, of course, are highly involved in it and all the nuances. Video gaming, as Zach pointed out, is sort of the platform of what this ecosystem grew on. But now we've got real sports teams, real media companies, Lori, like your company, Beasley, and it's starting to attract a lot of interest on the parts of both publishers and advertisers and marketers, agencies. So that brings in the data companies like Comscore and MRI Simmons trying to understand what's going on with the data side. It is a complex ecosystem. At the beginning of the webinar, we called out this report we did last time. We looked at esports mix, esports evolution and media. There's the URL down at the bottom. We'll make that a complimentary report here. Last slide for this session is just a call out to some of the services at BIA. We thank you for being with us here today. Esports is, as Lori mentioned, a brand extension. That's also an adjacent market for media companies and advertisers and agencies to get into. That's one of the things we specialize in, is helping companies understand new markets and new products and new competitive strategies and so on. So with that, I'm going to thank you again for joining us today. Let me turn it back to you, Patrick, to kind of close us out. We have a survey we'd love to have you participate in, and we'll send you follow-up information based on your participation in today's webinar. We look forward to having you again with us. Thank you. Patrick?
Thanks, Rick, and thank you to all our speakers and everyone that attended. Just as a quick reminder, again, we did record today's webinar, and we will be sending out an on-demand version of the webinar as well as a PDF of the slide deck. And then, as Rick mentioned, as you log off, there will be a quick survey if you can just fill out quickly and just kind of let us know if you have information about the webinar today. We'd really appreciate it. So with that, just kind of keep those things in mind. Look out for that email from us, and we'd just like to thank everybody for attending today and all of our speakers and everything. So we like to thank everybody and have a nice day. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. Thanks, Rick. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.